it's a continuation from the when we were talking about the cradle. So we had a discussion about the cradle, and we saw some interesting things, that being about the whole Mahdi word, which is translated as cradle. We suggested it might mean something like the one who returns, or like the returner, something like this. The traditional rendering was always rightly guided one, something like that, but it was quite unspecific. They didn't quite know in the sources of Tabari and such. Anyway, point being is that we then had this other word in conjunction with the Mahdi, which we presented as being potentially willing or desired, chosen one, something like this maybe. That said, we also looked at the potentiality from the Ethiopic, that being for baptism or immersion. And that's when we were looking at this sa-ba-ya word. So in this situation, the root appears fairly confidently to include the y as well, where then the way I would read this is looking at it as the SBY root, sa-de-ba-y root, with the suffix definite article that wasn't rendered over. That's the way I see it. But anyway, point being is we looked at this, and in the context of Surah 19, we see the word twice. So we see the word occurring in the context of John once, and then in the context of Jesus once. The one we're looking at here is in the context of Jesus, where it says, how we speak, who is in the cradle a child, according to the standard translation. And so this word is both times translated as child. And we were looking at the potentiality here of it referring to baptism, given how this is a narrative discussing John the Baptist and Jesus, who, was also an infamous or famous for baptism, of course. So these are words that we would expect in the story that is focusing and elevating John. We call him John the Baptist for a good reason, right? And that isn't invented in the English language. This goes back, of course, to day one. So potentially it was something about the wisdom of baptism. That's what I put forward here as a potential reading. That said, we also looked at this other one, which would mean more, it would be more, let's say, unique, right? It could mean baptism, I suppose, based on its context, but this Ethiopic root, which we found very interesting, the Saba-Ya root in the Ethiopic, actually means to spill over or to overflow, right? Like imagine the imagery of Christ's, the water from Christ, which overflows, right? So that's what we had for context. So that's the question today, is this idea of Sabians. And I visualized it here with the stars, because they were supposedly star worshippers. Yeah, JC?
Kash, yes, before we actually get to this part of the presentation, I wanted to give a little bit of context of what happened with those previous two verses. So if you put the mind actually rolling back to the ones where we see, yes, here, that would be perfect. So from the beginning, Kash and I, we realized that the Quran needed to have some words that they just had to be there, because if it's talking about Jesus as the Messiah, and then we kept finding him more and more, and also the Spirit and so on. So the book is very Trinitarian. So we knew that there are some words that have to be in the Quran, but they apparently weren't. And one of them was baptism. There were many others, like crucifixion. We would expect to find that again and again, resurrection, these sort of things. And we are now finding them, including resurrection, and we'll talk about those things in the future. There are lots of words that they were hidden, and baptism was meant to be one of those. It had to be there, but we just didn't say it until we were having a conversation with Hakan Jones, his channel, and he mentioned, "Oh, well, look at this," and that triggered us to actually go and look at the actual root, and we were surprised to see that this particular entry, that it is translated as a child in the case of John and also in the case of Jesus. Both of them in Surah 19, Surah Miriam, and this word happens to appear exactly in the place where you would expect it to see. You wouldn't expect to find this word when talking about Moses or anything like that. But Christians, particularly, they would never call John John. They always call him John the Baptizer. It's always qualified. So if baptism was to appear anywhere, it would certainly have to be near John. And there it is. And the second one, Jesus. Okay, it would make a lot of sense as well for that word to be with with John and with Jesus. And also, after saying last time that the word cradle that appears just before this root that we are analyzing today happens to most likely not be cradle and being about returning or the returning one or something of the sort. Now we start to see that, okay, yes, the Quran is very Trinitarian, it's talking about Jesus a lot and about the Spirit and so on, and words that we were expecting to see, they were there to begin with, but then they were hidden. And I think this one is a very obvious one to see because it happens to be attached to John and attached to Jesus, exactly what you would expect them to see.